Hello and welcome to In Search of Purpose with Sal Hanvey.
Hello, Deirdre. Thanks for joining us today on my podcasts, the first hopefully of many. And thank you for taking the plunge with me on podcast number 1, In Search of Purpose.
Search of Purpose. Thank you for having me on, Sal. I'm very happy to be on. Thank you very much.
Not at all. So I want to start by just talking a wee bit about your history. I would like you to share with the public, if you don't mind, your experience of the Hippocrates clinic in Boston, which is a naturopathic clinic in America. Can you run us through your backstory as to what brought you to where you are now?
Okay, well, it's a long story, but that's okay. Where to begin? Just begin at the beginning, I suppose. So it was in the late 70s, early 80s that I was living in Boston with my late husband, Neil. And I was always a bit of an explorer. Try and keep the short version to this. I was always exploring about how to make the world better, I suppose. I came from Trinity College, where I had done social work, sociology. I was very interested in political change and in making the world a better place. And I was interested in doing that through politics. So we were both, Neil and I were both sort of involved in maybe more, radical politics, or you might call it human justice or that. So we were studying in Boston, living in Boston, and I was working in a gym part-time while I was going to college. It was a fairly radical college called Goddard College, which existed for a very short period in Cambridge, and I was studying women's studies.
Okay, and what were you working in the gym as a personal trainer?
And I was working in a gym, yes. Let me see, at that time I was working in the YWCA. Actually, I was running a gym at the time. You know, like a lot of Americans, I worked full-time and went to college full-time, and I was very young and energetic. But I became very interested while running this gym in the idea of well-being. And it sort of occurred to me that well-being is definitely created by the society you live in, but it's also created by your internal reality. I think that occurred to me at that time. It was sort of a development of consciousness that you really were in control of your own well-being by your nutrition, by your state of physical health.
Yeah.
And I had heard of this place, Hippocrates, and the first time I heard about it, I thought they sounded complete nutcases because there were people going on about the health of your colon. And I remember I met these people in a sauna someplace, and I thought they were lunatics because they were really interested in their colons. And I thought, oh my God. But then a while later, I was cycling by and I suddenly noticed that's that place those crazy people were talking about. And I went in, and I just parked my bike against the wall. I was about 26, and I walked in the door, and I thought, oh, I was just struck by the energy of the place, by how beautiful the energy was, and how lovely the people looked, and how kind they looked. There was a girl sitting behind reception, and her face was like that of an angel. And then the manager, who I'm still friends with, Brian Clement, came wandering out, and because I was from Ireland and it was Boston, loads of people love the Irish in Boston. Yes. He was like, "You're Irish," and
exactly.
Oh my God, my granny was Irish, and he started chatting to me. And I was sort of talking to him, but I was looking at the books, and there was a book called Survival into the 21st Century. And there was a book called The Essene Gospel of Peace. And at the time I would have been pretty much an atheist, but I was sort of like, because I came out of that whole lefty, Trinity College.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
But I was very struck, and I said, sure, I could never afford to come here, slag at each other. And he said, oh, well, maybe we could work something out. And I said, but I'd never leave my husband and to come. And he said, oh, well, you can go home at night, and I said, okay. So he was a very kind person, and we're still really good friends. It's Brian Clement. He runs the place in Florida now. And he said later that he liked me because I was into feminism. I asked him later, why did you take a shine to me? And he said, because I've always admired women who stood up for themselves. And here you were, you came in and you were full of sass and you said that you were studying women's studies. And I was like, because a lot of people would have been hostile to that. But he said no. So he enabled me to go to this place, which was mostly full of older, sick people, to be honest. And I was a young one. But after 2 weeks of living on a raw vegan diet, and now you must remember that I had a regular meat and potato diet at the time. I think I was just ripe for change. I was kind of tired of the political old world sort of, the problem is with the world. If you change the world, we'll all be okay. And a sort of a dualistic philosophy, I would call it now, where it's them and us, and the problem is them. And we just have to change the political system and all of that. So in that 2 weeks, I was still very young. And I didn't really see it as a sort of philosophical thing at the time. I saw it as purely physical, that we were eating different food. And it was very strange. And I remember I'd go home, I'd cycle home to Neil at night, and he'd say, oh God, whatever you're on, I want some of that. Because I was so happy with it and upbeat. So this was my introduction to veganism a long time ago, raw veganism, mind you.
Before it became like a fad and a craze. You were a pioneer.
The thing. So after that, Neil and I both changed our diet. We decided to experiment with that. And gradually I started to volunteer there. And then gradually Neil was interested, and he was always a very smart guy. He was from Derry in the north, and he was we'd be writing home, and our families all thought we had lost it completely, like becoming vegetarians and doing yoga and all of this kind of stuff. But gradually we got into that world. Then we came back to Ireland in 1984, and we set up Cornucopia Health Food Shop.
Yes.
Which later became Cornucopia Restaurant.
Yes, and that's what I want to go in to talk about, because I came across
that's sort of a long introduction.
Well, yeah, but it's a really interesting one, because before I met you, I did a course in Dublin, and went to your restaurant on high recommendation from a colleague, and I went and literally was blown away beyond belief, to the point where I just thought, why is there not one in Northern Ireland? And I can remember saying to whoever it was behind the counter, why is there not one of these in Northern Ireland? But it was just literally at the start of the recession.
Yes, that is. But I've never wanted another one, Sal.
I know.
Because maybe it will happen one day.
Yeah.
Maybe because my daughter Dorina is now the general manager, and she's also having a family at the moment, baby and that. So I don't know. I don't know. But that's another conversation about business.
That's another conversation. But I just wanted to say that it just inspired me to see something that had been established for so long in the heart of Dublin, within the realms of what I love to eat. I mean, to see on the board gluten-free, dairy-free, sugar-free, wheat-free, gluten-free as standard, I literally was so impressed, to the point where I felt so relieved that I just didn't need to go into a restaurant and ask, is there gluten in that? Is there dairy in that? Is there, for whatever reason I would have been off a certain thing at a certain time, trying different things out, alternatives and so on. And for it just to be a standard, was properly rocking my world. So I just wanted to say that. And obviously,
well, I can thank Hippocrates for that, because I learned so much over the few years we worked there. Then we both worked there full time, and every day they had classes morning and afternoon, and they still are in Florida and run their classes morning and afternoon. And just last year I went to another place, which is a sister place, which is in San Diego, called the Optimum Health Spa in San Diego, and they had really good classes on health morning and afternoon. But I suppose we created a business out of it, and we made it there for the general population, and then we probably modified a lot to make it more mainstream. And we also specialized, I think, in healthy main courses and healthy, so vegetarian rather than vegan, though recently it is almost all vegan. But anyway, that's another story. Yes.
Yeah, so, in the moment, obviously, we're here in April, middle of April 2020, and we can't deny the fact that there's a lot going on out in the world at the moment, ever changing every minute of every day with the COVID-19 coronavirus. You've made it work for
Yes.
yourself, haven't you? I mean, it took a while to
Oh,
adapt.
yes, it was a shock to, well, I knew it was like everybody else was coming, but it's hard to know. Yeah, it all seems like a long time, and yet it's a very short time.
Yeah.
So recently, our response, like a lot of restaurants, is to turn our business into a delivery and collection service. And
Great.
we're in the very early stages of that. And it has been, it has been terrifying and fun. It's a bit like having a startup. Our management team are amazing. I have an amazing management team, and we're all working really closely together through things like Zoom and WhatsApp video. And there's about 6 of us, and we're all putting our heads together, and we've all become very close. And we're saying, okay, we could do this and we could do that, and how do we keep everybody safe, and who can go in, and which staff members don't have anybody vulnerable living with them. So it's a sort of a balance between keeping people safe and providing this essential service of food. And one of the things I think is so important is that people realize now the important things are food and waste collection and hospital services.
Absolutely.
And that, so it has been terrific. We've been delivering to people's homes, and this wonderful employee who used to work for us for 15 years, but he now has a taxi. So he has been able to employ his taxi, and he's actually volunteering at the moment for us, just delivering. I mean, I'll certainly sort him out down the road, but he has been so good in delivering to people's homes, and people are filling their freezers. So it's, you have to but one thing about life I think is really important, and something that plants learn, is that if you adapt to survive. Animals learn that, nature is that. So we are constantly being required to adapt to new circumstances.
Absolutely. And speaking of new circumstances and adapting, what's your take on the whole kind of north and south of Ireland working in unison for the greater good of prevention of further, spread of the COVID-19? And, how do you think this is going to impact on the future of Ireland going forward?
Well, I think it's interesting because the virus knows no borders. And I think borders are borders anywhere are a bit of a human construct.
Yeah.
And viruses, so they're all in our heads, really. They don't actually exist physically. So Ireland is an island. It does have 2 jurisdictions, and obviously there's a whole history behind that. So that needs to be respected. Yeah. However, beyond that, the whole treating the island as one entity is also part of our reality, because it is one entity. It's an island.
Exactly.
Surrounded by the sea.
It doesn't understand borders. It doesn't understand boundaries and restrictions.
Nature doesn't.
Over. That's right.
Nature has no boundaries, and we've always known that. The cows don't care whether they're eating grass from one jurisdiction or the next.
That's right.
Now, I think it's very important to look to the future, rather than be weighed down by the past. And one thing that isolation has been teaching me is to really practice mindfulness and present moment awareness. And also I'm doing a philosophy course at the moment, which talks a lot about unity, consciousness, and practical philosophy rather than duality. So the whole purpose is to respect nature more, and nature doesn't recognize those political boundaries. It recognizes geographical boundaries. So it makes no sense. It doesn't go with the flow to emphasize a hard border. However, obviously looking to the future, one has to respect all histories and all cultures, and that goes without saying. And I don't think that there's any room anymore for forcing. Part of one of the meditations I've been doing is about the law of least effort, which is something I've had a very difficult time always. It's part of Deepak Chopra's understanding, but you go with the flow. And the flow is now showing that we need to operate as one geographical area. while respecting different jurisdictions and the will of the people and all those political good things, which can only be good and lead to peace. But I have a great love for Ireland. I mean, my parents taught me a great love for Ireland. I was, prior to us talking, I was thinking about this topic, and I was thinking about the different kinds of loves there are. You know, but a love of country is certainly one that a lot of people feel. It needs to be a positive love, though, not an exclusive love where you're separating from others.
Yes, or an enforced love.
Enforced love,
Exactly.
yeah.
Well, speaking of history and times gone by, I believe that you were part of the second wave feminist movement, if I can say so.
Yes, absolutely. Yes,
And
that's what I
obviously,
was part of. Very
yeah.
much so.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about how you took going into that area of things?
Yeah, well, I was born in 1953, so I would have been maybe 10 in 1963, if you can imagine what was happening to the world. That was sort of prior to the 69 and any changes. So I don't think I was that aware. I remember my father telling me one time, you know, Deirdre, as a girl, you're a second-class citizen. And I remember I was a bit sort of, because he spoke to me seriously.
He believed that, did he?
Well, he said, he was kind of saying he was saying it in a sort of a feminist way. He wasn't agreeing with it, but he was kind of saying, you know, that's a tough reality. And I remember being very struck. And then as I moved into puberty, I wasn't so sure that I liked being female. I remember that. I wasn't so sure that I shouldn't reject femininity and be more of a tomboy. It seemed that I was losing, I wouldn't have had the language for it, but as I developed into a young woman, I felt like I didn't quite have the same status as I did as a female child.
Okay.
I think there's a difference once you start to grow and develop and become a woman. I think that if you're a little tomboy girl, that's okay. So I wasn't quite sure about what that really liked. And I think I was a bit rebellious. And I also think that I really felt sad about it. You know, I could see that I was dismissed a bit, that my voice didn't have as much weight, that so I was aware of this, but there wasn't much around me. But then when I went to Trinity, there were some wonderful professors there, absolutely wonderful. Sean Damer, James Wickham, Brian Thoreau, they were all in the sociology. They were all in the sociology department. I remember them very well. We went to college young then, I was 18. And there was no gap years or that, but they completely radicalized us. And I remember Sean Damer gave me a book called The Female Eunuch. And at that time, I was going off to the States, I remember, to work in a social work placement. And I remember I was there by myself waiting for my friends to join me. And I couldn't believe when I read Germaine Greer's The Female Eunuch. It was like she gave language to feelings that I hadn't been able to express ever. And I was so delighted. So then when I came back to Ireland, myself and a group of friends, so that would have been 1971, we started a group. And apparently I was at the first meeting. My friend Saundra tells me this, or somebody told me, in Mulligan's pub in Poolbeg Street, the first meeting of Irish Women United.
Wow.
So I think there had been a women's liberation group, but we were a bit more edgy. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
And we were reading all this stuff, and we were in college, and everything was changing. And at the same time, believe it or not, at the same time, I'll tell you a different story, which was about gay rights, which sort of got connected to that at that time. So I left college in 1975 and I started in 71. So this was probably 72, 73. And I was part of that group. One of the things we used to do is we used to go out in the middle of the night and put up posters. It was very, what we now call casual sexism was very common back then. And it appeared a lot in advertising. And it was very I remember there was a magazine called Spare Rib, and they used to put up examples of advertisements that insulted women. So we would go, and if there were advertisements that insulted women, we would put up posters called this ad insults women. We would get out with our ladder, we printed these big posters and we would put them up. So when people were driving into work in the morning, they would see this. And I couldn't believe it. My mother started doing it too. My mother,
Okay.
my husband Neil, her name was Eileen. My mother used to call her Red Eileen. I remember that. And somebody shouted at her when she was doing it one day, "Go home and make your husband's tea." I remember that out of a bus. Oh, that was. You were supposed to have a sense of humor.
Red
The whole
flag
thing
to
about
Bill.
sexism is you were always supposed to maintain a sense of humor and see it as funny. It was never cool. It's a bit like being, I've had to put it up with being a vegetarian, people slagging the vegetarian, like they certainly slagged women and any sort of women's liver or bra burners or anything at the time. So yeah, that was the start of it. But then I thought, what do I want to do? I was very drawn to an academic life, and I immediately thought, well, maybe I'd like to be a professor of women's studies and history. And so that was why I ended up studying women's studies in Boston. I finished college in 75, so it took me a little while, but maybe in 78, 79, I was doing a master's in US women's history in Boston, in a place called Goddard. Yes.
But then the third wave movement come on, and now almost like Germaine Greer, not to get into a mad like feminist one, because we could be here all day, but Germaine Greer almost was ridiculing the third wave with regards to their approach, their attitude, their demeanors, and so on. You know, so in a sense, you know, they stand alone in their own belief systems, but yet under one umbrella of feminism, regardless of the wave.
Well, part of my going into the Hippocrates, sort of a different level of consciousness, was I remember my cousin came from New York, a dear friend of mine. She's my cousin and my dear friend, and she wouldn't have been involved in any of this. She was family. And she said to me, "Deirdre, your friends are always giving out about the world. They're never happy. Everything is always wrong." And it really struck me. And that's, I think, when I started to move away from feminism and left-wing politics into something that was a bit deeper. But to answer your question about third wave feminism, I do think that second wave feminism, and maybe it was necessary, rejected femininity. That was why I was saying to you that I was uncertain about femininity when I was a child. But one of the things, and I'm very grateful to my husband Neil for this, he said, he taught me how wonderful it is, and I think I relearned to be a woman, how proud we should be to be women and not feel ashamed of femininity. In fact, if anything, it was Neil was the first person. Now, he did die in 1993 rather suddenly, but we were together for a long time. So we sort of grew up together in a way, because we met when we were very young. So one of the things he loved women, and he thought women were great. And he loved his sisters and his mother. He was particularly proud. He thought women were better people than men.
I've met men.
And I remember,
it's interesting.
And I remember he taught me to be really proud of being a woman, and that it was a good thing. It was that we were better people. And then I suppose I kind of put that all aside, but then now I have daughters, 3 daughters, and they have been quite feminist in their outlook, but they're very feminine people. And they very much embraced femininity as a powerful thing. So I feel that third wave feminism took something back that second wave feminism probably rejected, which is femininity.
Yeah, I understand that. It's nearly like they became overly radical to the point where they nearly did themselves a disservice, because you have to be everything to everyone rather than just being a woman.
Well, that was another part. Now, that was another thing that I don't think women have quite got over.
No, they haven't.
No, I really do think that the world is still a very patriarchal place, and there needs to be a fourth wave and probably a fifth and sixth wave. And I think that obviously we're a bit ahead of the curve here in Ireland. It's probably a very good place for a woman to be.
Yeah.
But there are so many places in the world where it's not a good place to be. And I mean, I don't want to say anything about any particular country, but a friend of mine is in Australia, and he's saying all the women are very macho there. So I think they're sort of in that phase where you've got to be macho as a woman to count. And
Yeah.
and we've got sort of past that, but a lot of the world has not. And it's probably a first step.
Well, I love Joni Mitchell's quote, and it's a man's world. Men wrote most of the songs for women, and they are mostly tales of seduction. I wrote my own songs, that ended that.
Oh, that was great. Yeah. So it's hard to you swim in a sea of patriarchy. So it's very hard to have a different consciousness. Like, you don't even notice it a lot of times, and we internalize, and internal bias. I mean, racism is also the same. You know, we experience women are the other, and even when you listen to, and I was listening to, I'm reading Albert Camus, The Plague, for a book club, but it's written in I'm not sure, the 60s, when did ever he write it? It's about the 40s, but it's all man. Every character in it is a man.
A white man.
It's all men, and I sort of try and pass the, that, and the world is referred to as men. Men feel this, men feel that. So sometimes it's better to switch off that awareness, because it could drive you nuts.
It could drive you nuts, yeah. But same with I find the exact same parallel with men are from Mars, women are from Venus. Okay, you think this is great. It's a story about what a man thinks and then what a woman thinks, but written by a man.
Yeah.
And I just think that book should have been written in 2 parts, and half of it should have been written by a man and half of it should have been written by a woman, in order to get the 2 perspectives that were being put forward, but only by a man.
Yeah, I was listening to Callan's Kicks. It's a very funny radio show, and they were doing a spoof of Trump being really, really rude to female journalists, and it was so funny, because they were so on the spot, and he said, "Enough of that and your lady facts," and I just thought it was absolutely hilarious. It was really putting it out there. There's such a thing as lady facts, and I mean, I'm sure he never said that, but it was Callan's Kicks said it, and it was just so funny.
Well, speaking of music, Joni Mitchell and so on, to lighten it up a bit, I would like to know, what are your 3 favourite songs, and give us a reason behind why they're your 3 favourites.
My 3 favourite songs. Okay. I'm very fickle. I change my music every week, but I have been really, really listening to Elton John's sad songs, because I came across a version of it. Sad songs say so much, and I listened to it over and over again. It really touched me, because I was feeling sad at the time, obviously, when my business had to close down recently. And I mean, I know it's only temporarily closed down, but it was such a shock. I was devastated. I was in grief, and I listened to there was a program about him there was a movie about him which happened to be on TV that I watched, called Rocket Man, and then I really liked Elton John.
Good, is it? I haven't watched it.
Yeah, it's a great film, and I was like, gosh. Okay, so I went online to listen, because I wanted to hear more of his music. And I just like his lyrics, and I know that he doesn't write it. Another person writes his lyrics.
Didn't know that.
Yeah, he has a guy called John Taupin writes his lyrics, and they've been working together since they were teenagers. And it's such a great story of Elton John. I just love those lyrics of so many songs, and they're so real. But anyway, sad songs say so much, and he was up there on stage playing it, and it just gave me a great lift. So that was one song.
Brilliant.
Okay, so another person who's featured a good bit in my life of recent months is Luca Bloom, because Luca Bloom,
brother, isn't it?
Yes, that's right. Yes, he plays in Cornucopia for charity.
Brilliant.
And so which of Luca's songs would I think? There's one called "I'm a Bog Man." There's I'm a Bog Man. Yeah, about turf. About turf. And he also writes other songs of his own and sings covers. But we recently did a charity gig back in January. No, it was on St. Bridget's Day, the 1st of February. Seems like a long time ago now.
I know.
And it was for a charity called Médecins Sans Frontières, and also for another group that rescue people from the Mediterranean, and who are in these wooden boats coming out of Libya. So we did, I have great time for him, and he recently gave a free concert, which was so nice, from a health food shop. I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of the shop, and it was wonderful. So that would be another person that comes to my mind. And then I remember I really like Jackson Browne.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, there was a period where I was in great grief when Neil passed away really suddenly, when I was 39, 40 years of age. And and I found his songs so comforting, because he was so heartbroken. And he was grieving so much for a relationship in his own life. And he wrote these, he wrote these incredible songs at the time. And there's a song, sorry, I don't have the name, but about roadies that he sings. But there were other more heartfelt songs. So I think sometimes a song can capture your mood and help you process emotion.
Absolutely.
And may I mention one other? Last week for Easter, there was a free concert given in the Milan, sorry, and the name, sorry, I'm probably, because I'm a bit nervous, the name is escaping. Bocelli gave a free concert in the Milan Cathedral, and he sang Amazing Grace. I mean, standing, and the man is blind, and when he said, "And now I can see," and he gave a little smile. It was so
amazing.
beautiful. And Easter Sunday, was a tough time this year with the COVID-19 and everybody being isolated and not to get out, and you can't see family. So he was wonderful. Yeah.
That's brilliant. Well, I'll allow you that fourth one under the
I snuck him in there.
So look, you and I, we talk a lot. We enjoy each other's company. Our conversations, I mean, literally could go on forever. One thing that we talk about, but not often, is climate change. And
Climate change,
I mean, even if we just touch on it briefly, because you own a restaurant that for 30 years, and you've been running it very successfully, one of the best, if not the best in my eyes.
Thank you, Sal.
But when it comes to it, that's all part of it. You're part of climate change, if you think about it. You know it. But what I mean is, your business is a direct effect and impact on working towards that, because of the sorts of foods that you provide for the public. So obviously you believe in that so much that you carry it through into your line of work. Do you want to explain a bit more about the connection?
Well, I think that gives huge motivation to me and the other people who work in Cornucopia, the team. Like, we have the hospitality industry is not an easy industry for lots of reasons, and I don't even want to go there now. But it's terrific. It's beyond terrific that we're part of the solution, or we see ourselves as part of the solution, rather than part of the problem, providing plant-based meals to people.
Amazing.
I mean, we were doing it long before climate, but I was always aware of the environment. I remember when I was back in Hippocrates, we had a teacher there who talked about the environmental disaster. That was back in 1984 or 83. And he was talking about, and then he had this wonderful story about the man who planted trees and grew hope. I remember that. And I mean, to be able to provide tasty plant-based food is also such a joy, because the fact that it tastes great, it can't be just worthy. There's nothing.
Well, that's exactly right.
So it has to be both flavorsome, good for you, nutritious, good for the environment, and also to bring, so that's the physical, the environmental, and also there's compassion.
And ethics.
Recently, I've started to do a course on compassion.
Brilliant.
And which is sort of Christian light, I call it, but it's really, really important that we extend compassion to nature and to other species that share the planet with us, beyond compassion to humans.
I love the fact that you do courses on the likes of compassion and philosophy, but you could run the courses. You do know.
I don't know about
You know,
that.
you're speaking about it, from a real deep sense of purpose, and and that's why it's great to start these podcasts with the likes of yourself in search of purpose, because I really feel that you've achieved the purposeful life that you've maybe set yourself out to do, considering that you've had 30 years immersed and entrenched in something that you feel so passionate about and is ethically and morally sound. I think it's really good. And I also
But Sal, can I tell you
Yeah.
that most of the time of my days are spent with dealing with a blast chiller that has broken down, a fridge that needs servicing, a kitchen porter that's upset, a law that has to be complied with to do with health and safety, an accountant who needs it is such a joy for me to go back to the reason. But one of the things that I think is really, that being in the restaurant industry has been good for me personally, is my dear father used to say that I was away with the fairies, and I think I am away with the fairies, to be quite honest. I think I naturally have what the School of Philosophy calls a lot of sattva, which is I'm very spiritual by
Satwa?
nature. Sattva, they call it. Yeah,
Love
they call
that.
it sattva.
Love that.
And I have a lot of that in me.
Yes.
But I need to be grounded, and my goodness, there's nothing as grounding as keeping a profit margin in a restaurant, in knowing that you have to work with, is it something 3 kilograms or is it 20 kilograms, and being very much in the here and now in a practical way.
Yeah, but a lot of people are doing that stuff in their work and they absolutely detest their work and also have to do that. At least you're doing that knowing that the core belief is something that you're massively passionate about, and it somewhat makes those things not completely null and void of your responsibility, but it makes it more purposeful, again, using that word.
Yes, and the people who work with me, like Tony, our head chef, Tony Kyo, I mean, that he works so hard and is working hard now to get the business up and running. And again, I know that at the back of it, he has such a love for the animal world, that inspires him to cycle in at 5 a.m. and start working, so he has the dinner ready, the food ready at 12. Or my daughter Dorina, who's now the general manager with me, I know that she also has a great love for the fact that we're doing something that and inspired, and also the fact that the business comes from her father, who she lost when she was 4 years of age. We're very much following that, so there's a lot of heart in the business. And I can mention many others. Margaret, who's been one of our managers for years. I mean, she used to be out there holding the posters about the animal rights when she was a teenager. And now she's a mother of 3 and does her bit for the payroll. She does the payroll in Cornucopia. And,
it's fantastic. But the thing is, Deirdre, if I had never have heard any of these stories, hadn't have read your first Cornucopia at home cookbook, if I hadn't have read the introduction and the stories, if I had heard nothing about any of this, which I hadn't, and I walked into that restaurant, it translated massively to me, that story, without knowing its content. Like you can just feel it. And I think it's also, I mean, I've been a vegetarian from birth, and it's not a political thing, it's not a activist thing, it's no placards standing outside for animal rights, nothing. It's been literally, my mum felt sick when she walked into a butcher's shop and she didn't eat meat. My brothers ate meat. She didn't have that sickness with them, so they ate meat.
Oh, when she was pregnant with you,
yes.
When she was expecting you.
Yes.
Oh my goodness, that's so funny.
And my mum said to me,
interesting.
Oh, it is very interesting, because people say, is it your family, or is it religious? And I say neither. What it really was my mum says, trust you to make a statement before you were even born. She said it would not be like you.
I can imagine you as a 5-year-old.
Yeah,
making big statements.
Well, she said, like, when I was about 6 months old, after milk and food started to be brought in and solids and so on, she said that apparently I used to spit the meat out like a stew, for example. I used to spit the meat out like a stone of an olive, she said. It's as if,
Really?
like,
So
yeah,
interesting.
and it was like an innate reaction in me to reject the meat, the texture, the taste, everything. So I ate the sauce, the vegetables, and so on.
So you've never eaten meat in your life?
Never. Oh, I
Yeah, I
have.
liked the taste of meat. I liked meat.
Did you? Well, no, I
Yeah.
had chicken by mistake once, but it was in a spring roll that I thought was vegetarian. So, I mean, it didn't kill me, but it definitely it was an awful experience. But no,
Yeah.
I've never.
No, I loved meat, and I see meat as having a lot of flavor.
Yeah.
I'm not put off by the idea of meat. I've even cooked meat still, over the years, if family members, and I'm very careful in a group where there would be meat, and that I would never. I think it's a very personal decision. It's a bit like
Absolutely.
religion, but for you, I would be very, very careful, because being vegetarian automatically can make people feel on the back foot, and one has to be very sensitive. Over the years, I've noticed, because being a bit older than you, it was very unusual, so you have to kind of tone it down a lot.
Absolutely, but because I'm 39 now, I literally have been a vegetarian from the 80s, So it's the same principle, and I've watched the development and the growth over time of how things have changed, and more so in more recent years. And so I'm not jumping on a bandwagon, but it doesn't matter if you are.
But your story is that you were
Different.
born without any desire for meat.
Yeah, so when people say, do you mind if I eat meat? If we go for dinner and there's some people who don't know me, and they say, do you mind if I eat meat? And I just say, well, do you mind if I eat vegetables? Because, because,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, don't get me wrong,
So
I want to be a vegetarian, but I don't push my belief system down someone else's throat, literally or metaphorically.
Yeah, yes, very good. So I just wanted to say a little bit more about, because what did I want to say a little bit more about? That we were talking about spirituality there.
Yes,
A
I mean,
little
that's what I
bit.
wanted to talk to you about, your religious beliefs, if you have any, and how you started off, the journey that you went on, and where you've come to now, because obviously that's part of who you are, and it's important to talk about that.
Yeah, well, I suppose like a lot of people in Ireland, I rejected Catholicism, particularly of my generation. And I would have been brought up my parents were devout Catholics, so like everybody I was born in the 50s, so it was just, we lived in that world where we said the Angelus every day, we said the Rosary every night.
Yeah.
We had the ritual of the week was all about religion. My mother was a very truly spiritual person, I would think. My father was more the doctrines, but my mother used to say to me, I'd ask a lot of questions as a child, and my mother used to say to me, it's a mystery. Mm-hmm. And I didn't really want to accept that, so I went into science. But I've come out the other end of science thinking, yeah, she was probably right. It is a mystery.
But that's it. I mean, for people who have faith, it's a very, very comforting thing, And what's your take on nature as God?
Oh, I love the idea. Now, I wouldn't say I was always more drawn to Jesus,
yeah,
as an idea, as a person.
Entity.
So yeah, I think as a child, I felt very close to the idea of Jesus, the child Jesus. Mm-hmm. And recently I went through a whole completely 100% atheistic, many, many years, but I've sort of come back and found, perhaps, I don't even like to use the word faith, because to me that is almost like admitting that I'm a meat eater again or something, because I rejected Christianity so much, and the patriarchy of it and the church, but I have found myself drawn back, and I'll speak more about that in a minute.
Yeah.
But so sorry, what was your question? I'm sorry, Sal, I lost my train of thought.
The journey of the religious journey for yourself. You went through.
Okay, so started off very Catholic, rebelled, and threw the whole thing out. I had a very significant moment where one of my professors in Trinity said to me, and he would have been of a very much sort of a left-wing view, but that's stupid to believe in religion. That's the opium of the people. That's that. So from that time on, I just gave up any belief. I just believed that there was nothing. And I kept that belief, I would think, until maybe a decade later. So I went through a decade of strong atheism around the time that I was sort of tired of all the world is wrong. Before I went to Hippocrates, I remember I was very drawn to a Beatles song, which was When I Was Younger, So Much Younger Than Today. I didn't need help in any way. I remember I really liked the lyrics of that song because it seemed to me that I did need a bit of help. I was a bit lost because the left-wing ideologies that I had so believed in, maybe a bit like I substituted religion for them. And so I started searching again for the truth. I don't think we ever reached the truth, but it's a great thing to be a seeker of the truth.
Isn't it?
So I think when I went to Hippocrates, I was sort of found my way back to New Age religion, or maybe more Eastern philosophies. Yeah. And Neil at that time became very interested in Buddhism. I remember he found a book in a skip. And he thought it was really interesting that he found it in a skip.
That's a really good start of a good
three
story.
pillars of Zen.
Ah, yeah.
And Neil also, because he didn't like the role the church played in Northern Ireland politics, he came from Derry, he also had thrown out perhaps the baby with the bathwater and completely rejected and become an atheist with me. But slowly we started to find some of the Buddhist ideas acceptable and interesting, and of course we were hanging out with vegetarians, so where else would you have been vegans, where else would you find that? And then I remember I came across these people were all studying A Course in Miracles, and I was kind of horrified because that's a very much a Christian philosophy. They were all doing study groups, and I thought, well, if they're doing it, they're pretty cool, maybe it's okay. And A Course in Miracles, and they, and they would speak about the fact that there were only two emotions. One was love and the other fear, and love is letting go of fear, and there'd be workshops around on A Course in Miracles. So I was aware then that maybe Christianity wasn't all bad, and maybe there was something beyond the church, and the church was just a human patriarchal aspect of it, but it wasn't the true message of Jesus. So I thought, but I still couldn't handle that, anything to do with Christianity. So I kept up with my sort of more Eastern philosophies, studied Buddhism. I was always interested in Native American philosophies, and that would be, because I studied Native American history, and I just love the view they had of the spirit of the river. And so I was always just dabbling and
interested. The thing, isn't it, the spirit of the river, that naturalistic pantheism, which is obviously nature as God.
Yeah, it's very
resonates massively, because I mean it is, it's so beautiful if you don't reject it and fight it, nature,
Yes, so I think that there is, maybe I need to explore more pantheism. Maybe that could be my next thing.
That could be your next thing.
But I suppose when Neil passed away, it brought me back. I remember when he got ill, and it was a very short illness, over 3 months. And because we were, in our late 30s, at that time, our parents were still around. And in Ireland, when you're dying, he was told that he had weeks to live because he got pancreatic cancer. Yeah. And here we were, not churchgoers, to the absolute horror of our parents, but we were still being parented by our parents, who were in their 60s at the time, basically my age group, if you can imagine, because I have kids in their early 30s. So they were going into their 70s. So what do you do when somebody's dying? But you get the priest.
Oh yeah.
And this little nun used to come to us that I knew when I was a teenager, called Sister Stanislaus, and we thought, we were too shocked by the fact that he had been given weeks to live.
Yeah.
We were in shock, and we said, okay. So this little nun came, and this little priest came, and they were so kind. It would have been rude to reject them. So I was following what Neil wanted, and I noticed that facing death, as he did as a young man of 40 years of age, who had never really considered death before, and who was a professed atheist, I was taking his lead. And I found that something in him bubbled up from his youth, from his childhood. And he listened to the priest, and so whatever he wanted, fine. He did the rosary. I had been given a Bible, when I was in America by some people, and I actually went and I read passages from the Bible to him. I was watching him. I didn't know whether I believed it or not. The Lord is my shepherd, I remember I read to him. And I remember he liked it. It was like, his ego started to disintegrate. The ego that had been fighting, that said this was the opium of the people. It's like facing death. He started to open up in a way and flower in a way.
Yeah.
And
his own consciousness.
Yeah, and then we spoke a lot about it. So I think after his death, I was more open to the idea of religion.
I can understand
because
that.
It was a big part. The funeral, we went through all of the rituals that go with the death in Ireland. It was 1993. So and I just sort of was silent and observed it and thought, Deirdre, if you were in a Buddhist country, the Buddhists would be out. If you were in, every society has things that kick in at death. And the room was filled with candles. People gave us holy pictures. People gave us Padre Pio's glove, all these things. And they were so beautiful. And people did it with such sincerity. We were so we traveled this journey together in a way back to religion in a very short period. And it was a bit of a deathbed conversion, but I could understand the reasons for a deathbed conversion, because you're facing the unknown and the child in you comes up. And so after he died, I became very interested in near-death experiences. I don't know if you've come across that, NDEs. They're where people die and come back. Because obviously I was so close to him. We were twinned. I wanted to know, what was he experiencing?
Yeah.
The other side. I didn't just say goodbye. Oh, you're dead now. Okay, off I go. Bye. In a way, my soul was pulled out of me a little bit. It wasn't necessarily good for me, but I can understand how people die when their partner dies. I can really understand that, because part of your spirit is pulled after them. I can understand why an older person would just go. But I had children, and Neil was from the north like yourself, so he was tough enough. And when I said to him, I think I'll go after you, he gave me such a look, such a stern look, like, don't you dare even think of that. Like, the look he gave me was the look my mother-in-law, who was wee Tess McCafferty from Derry, like there was no way I was to be in any way anything but here. And I remember thinking, oh my God, I'm only 39. I could have 50 more years. I better get it together here. Wow. Or 60 more years, or however knows we can live. Like, I remember sitting in a car and thinking, Christ, maybe I have a whole life ahead of me. I'm such a young person. Many people aren't even married at that age, of course. Though years ago we did marry very young, because you weren't allowed to live with anybody. So, so over the years, I sort of have dabbled back into Christianity because of that experience. And not too many years ago, I came across a philosophy on Facebook, a Facebook page about Emanuel Swedenborg. So he was a mystic that lived in the 17th century in Sweden. And it was really just because there was a Facebook page. And then I thought, my girls were encouraging me, and they were saying, Mum, you should really study theology. You should retire and study theology. You're so interested in spiritual things. So I enrolled in a course in theology, but I found it too orthodox for me.
Right.
And the woman in charge is really nice. And she said, fine, a lot of people are like you. They're trying to find their way back, but there's so much baggage attached to all that goes with the Lord and, forgiveness, all those kind of words. And even the language of the thing was so patriarchal. She said, why don't you just study compassion? Sounds like you'd really like that. So I'm involved in a study group at the moment on Christian compassion. But I wouldn't tell many people that, even though I'm telling the whole world through you, because they'd be like, what? Christian?
Yeah, but it also comes with an explanation. You're explaining and expressing for people to listen in their own time, And that was one thing I wanted to ask, before we go. I was going to say, what part of yourself are you working on at the moment? But maybe it is compassion.
Yes, I'm working. No, this is. I'm working on being better at numbers.
Oh yeah, I would be the same with names, but yeah.
Okay, I was never numerical. If you're going to run a successful business, you really have to pay attention to numbers. This is going 360 degrees different way.
Wow.
I can only allow myself to indulge in all that I've talked about here
Uh-huh.
part-time. Mostly, I have to run a business. And I'm working on, it wouldn't be my natural way to be into spreadsheets. I need to do a spreadsheet now on what we have done in the last 2 weeks and show the margins and
Yeah,
show
I don't envy you.
prime costs and all of that.
Mm.
I need to be able to do that very effectively in order to bring down from the ethereal into the practical, to make the very thing that you noticed in Cornucopia is made up of so many practical things. Mm-hmm. So really, I'll be doing the thing on all of that stuff I love to do. Mm-hmm. But really what I need to do is make this business work post COVID-19. Mm-hmm. And that's where all my energy probably will be going.
I'm sure everyone cannot wait to get back to your restaurant, and either can I. And what's keeping me going is your new cookbook, the green book, the vegan one, that come out, and it's fab. So I'm making away at the recipes in the house, but obviously I want to go and have the raw chocolate torte cakes and all the lovely yummy scrummy things.
Oh, thank you, Sal. And we were so amazed when we won Cookbook of the Year. Tony Kyo wrote that book, and with Aoife Carrigy, she's a wonderful journalist,
yes,
food journalist. Aoife Carrigy and Tony Kyo wrote it together, and then Darina and my daughter and I, did the introductions, and they're the recipes that are in Cornucopia, in contemporary recipes, and they're all plant-based. And so we're really proud. It was such fun to win that award.
That's
with
amazing.
Guild Publishing. Guild Publishing are an amazing publishing company, I will say that.
Yeah, and just before we go, if you had advice to give somebody who's listening to go vegetarian or vegan, not necessarily has to be one over the other, but if you had one piece of advice for someone who is about to make the leap, because it's never too late, what would that bit of advice be from someone like yourself who really knows it?
To use fresh herbs.
Yeah,
they really give flavor.
Yeah,
to work to create the flavor that is naturally present in animal foods. Like if you eat a piece of cheese or you eat a piece of meat, it's replenished, it's full of flavor.
Yeah.
And so a little bit of skill is required
to
create that flavor. It's almost like an orchestra. You have to have the high notes and the low notes and the range.
Absolutely.
You have to think of it like music.
Oh, I do.
Like flavor is, yes, because you have your cookbook, and you're also, if I may say, writing your cookbook, Sal, and you really understand about flavor. So food is life. It's full of life force, and the music of that food is the different layers of flavor. That's so right. You use really good ingredients. And I remember going to a chef, he's a raw chef called Shad Sarno, but he's a vegan chef now, and I think he has a brand in Tesco.
Right.
And he gave this amazing talk on food and cooking, and he said use the best ingredients, and I think there's 5 things. So you need an oil, some kind of a really healthy fat, so it could be avocado oil, a really good olive oil, it could be something, but it should be the best quality that you can afford.
Cold pressed, virgin,
so the
organic.
dish needs that fat, because that's the thing that the body loves, the healthy fat. It should have a sweet of some kind. It should be, so use the best quality maple syrup, or don't use just white sugar. Use something that gives it a lift, but is the best and healthiest, and it sings. So that's the sweet and the fat. Then it needs a saltiness of some kind. So use a saltiness that's the best soy sauce, the best flaky salt, something that really has health in it.
Like
not just table salt. Not just table salt. It needs a bitter. So a lemon or a really good vinegar, the best balsamic vinegar you can taste, or, you know, bitter leaves, something that gives a sharpness to it. You know, use fresh nettles or whatever it is that you can use, or really good rocket, a really sharp rocket, something that we give combined. And then it needs, the fifth one is that sort of meaty flavor called unami, which is really deep, a deep flavor. So I think roasted mushrooms, or, you know, roasting vegetables really brings out that depth of flavor, or that sweetness. Like, I just, before I came on, I just made this amazing curry, I have to say, but I roasted parsnips, and I roasted garlic. It's worth it to roasting, because if you're eating cooked food, you know. And then I think a really good thing with food is to eat a mixture of raw and cooked in the same thing, so you can really bring the higher notes. So suppose you have like a curry or something which is a bit heavy, there's lots of beans in it and that. If you have the fresh rocket and the fresh greens along with it, I mean, everybody knows that you get that whole orchestra playing, and also the fresh raw food gives you the enzymes of vitality that you need. So I mean, I can go on about food a bit.
Oh, amazing. I'm literally mouth watering to the point I'm going to go and make dinner. I was in the garden picking some wild garlic, and I'm going to make my wild garlic pesto pasta dinner with fresh rocket. So the rocket's on the side of the pesto pasta.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful, Sal. And you know, there's such a quality of life that comes when we have good food. Like if you want to enhance the quality of your life, of course, relationships are number one. And, you know, being in an environment that's fresh and full of flowers and nice colors and greenery, if you can. But the food that you eat every day, and just getting rid of rubbish out of this is a great time to get rid of rubbish. Just don't buy it. Don't bring it into the house.
Well, exactly. We do have choices to make, and, you know, we need to, you know, if there's ever a time to be immune strong, it's now under the circumstances. It's really important. And, you know, we're moving into spring, and, you know, we can eat more raw things, easier salads, and things are in abundance in nature, and everything's coming out. It's like a forager's dream right now, as long as you stay right close to your house. So, like, I've got some nettle in the garden, so I made a nettle and wild garlic soup, and then I dried some nettles out for tea, and then I made some pesto. So I'm literally in culinary heaven. So.
Oh, that's fantastic. I remember at Hippocrates, they taught us many things, but one of the things they thought about, now, obviously, there's times when you're going to slip, and nobody wants to be a saint. We're not into sainthood, because there's the light and the dark, always to be balanced. But if you're eating something, think, does this add to my health? Does it leave it exactly as it is? Or does it take from my health?
Absolutely.
So when you're eating something, you know, if it's really rubbish, you know, it's taking more than it's giving, or it's just being neutral, it's just the same, you know, or it's adding. No, this is adding to my health. And quality of life is just so important.
Exactly. Well, thanks. Let's leave it on that note, Deirdre. And again, thank you so much for being my first podcasting experience in search
Best of luck.
Thank you very much, and have a lovely evening.
The very best of luck, Sal, with your podcasts. Thank you, and your radio and all of that. Thank you. Bye-bye.